there is the budget, as we said, which is on the top of the list, and that is going to be the rest of our discussion here this morning. We are going to move into national security and then get economist Dr. Marlene Atz to go deeper. But we have the whole question of national security. We have had the pleasure before of having my next guest, and he is, let us see, the former commander of National Operations Center Trinidad and Tobago. He has left that position, and we leave that behind. He is now a senior lecturer at the Anglia Ruskin University Cambridge Business School and module leader of organizational transformation and organizational behavior. Commander Garvin Heerah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Hi, it's a pleasure this morning, Rennie, and to our guests listening, and as you would have always advocated, our viewing public.
Yes, indeed,
Indeed,
because yes, once we finish here, what happens is that we post the interviews up on our YouTube channel where folks can go up and they get a chance to pull this down at their convenience. This year, the national security budget is $7.7 billion, but it will be used minus some of the encumbrances of the last allocation, with crime and by extension national security being the top priority in the country. What does this figure, coupled with last year's budget allocation, which does not include the recent $117 million, mean for where we are? Considering the revenue shortfall demands, a leaner budget approach was expected. Would you, Commander, detail what are the positive crime and national security issues covered from your reading of the 2017 $7.7 billion disbursement?
Great. Thanks for the opportunity, Rennie. But before we actually go or dive into the analytical discussion with regards to the budget and what is proposed, I want to just stop a little bit for our public this morning. And let's refer a little bit to the title of the budget. The budget has been entitled A Brighter Future, the Blueprint for Transformation and Growth. And therefore, it is necessary for Trinidad and Tobago to understand the transformation process. Because what the government is signaling, with the greatest of respect, and we hope so, is governmental development, which in fact transcends into governmental transformation, and by extension, the achievement of governmental efficiency. Now, from a holistic perspective, this involves three main pillars: the pillars of leadership, motivation, and culture. And the deep dive involvement of the people. So therefore, policy and strategy, first it has to address the establishment of key deliverables that would enhance, would improve, would develop, more so change, because we're getting an aspect that the blueprint for transformation and growth would involve change. So therefore, it has to have the change approaches of the what we just mentioned: leadership, the motivation, and the culture. And these deliverables has to be integrated and linked to what is known in the domain as operational rollout and the implementation of measures. So therefore, the approaches of the transformation process, and I'm hoping that the government is gearing in this direction, must involve the first phase of the diagnostics, the second phase of the intervention, and the third most critical stage of implementation. So my question this morning as we go into the discussion would be, is the Ministry of National Security, or does the Ministry of National Security have the plan to navigate these clearly identified courses? And are there the right experts on board to partner or to crew the ship in the stormy seas ahead? Transformation is change. Change is development. Development is progress. Progress is the pathway to efficiency. But that takes some key dynamics. That is humility. It takes transformational leadership. It takes integrity, and the big one, accountability. So we have to wait and see. And as I close this introduction, it's important to know that the underpinning of all of this is the government's ability, or lack thereof, to sustain macroeconomic recovery, which integrates and links itself into the safety and security of Trinidad and Tobago.
The transformational mode, the voice you're hearing is that of Commander Garvin Heerah, who's our guest this morning. We're talking about the budget allocation and national security. Terrorism, fraud, transnational organized crime, gang violence, cybercrime, illegal migration, for all parts of the challenges faced by national security. When you speak of the transformation process, you say what is in place already. There were the establishments of a couple of things. Well, some of them you spoke about the last time you were here. And I think the establishment of the National Security Council Secretariat with the Threat Analysis Center is moving in the direction you spoke about, having one place the information comes to, where then you can do a real-time, accurate analysis of what's before you. Are you encouraged by this? Is the government trending in the right direction, is my question, with the establishment of the National Security Council Secretariat and the Threat Assessment Center?
But the Threat Assessment Center is ideal. It's integral to the decision making. But as we stay in the parallel corridors of the budget, in the Minister of Finance in September 30th, 2016, spoke about the implementation of some deliverables, right? And these were tabled in the 2016 budget, including, for instance, the establishment of the municipal community constabularies and a supporting corps for volunteers, right? And the minister says it will be part of the rollout of the local government reform. He went on to say in the 2016 presentation that the rollout of programs to foster the building of public trust in the police service, while at the same time rooting out corrupt and otherwise unsuitable individuals from the service, was also part of the planning and implementation. And then spoke in the 2016 presentation also about the establishing of the Joint Border Patrol Agency. So therefore, these clearly defined declarations now has to be held in the backdrop of the 2017 fiscal policy, and to indicate where are we going in that direction. And we see the minister now coming back in 2017 for the 2017 and indicating, one, we have been reorganizing our defense and national security strategy to address the wide range of current and new emerging threats. And he goes on to speak about terrorism, fraud, transnational crime, which has been always out there for conversation in the public domain. And back to the point that you opened, which he said, strengthening the National Security Council Secretariat with a threat assessment center, I think, under the office of the Prime Minister. He went on to speak about the National Intelligence Agency in providing reliable strategic information to the National Security Command Center, etc., etc. One has to understand that what needs to be communicated is the intent of Ministry of National Security to define and establish a clear, directed introduction of a national security policy, a national security strategy. Not that we are improving or we are adjusting or we are paying attention to the national security strategy. First question is, what is the national security strategy? The national security strategy has to absorb these key strategic intents, inclusive of current threat assessments. Is the national threat or the Threat Assessment Center, for instance, going to be the conduit, going to be the nerve center for these assessments? If so, then I would continue to advocate that they follow the framework of the RTVA, Risk, Threat, and Vulnerability Assessment. Because what this does is that it provides the quantitative and qualitative measurables that indicates threat or decrease of threat.
But don't we have, Commander Garvin Heerah, don't we have components that are contributing, even though it is not articulated with a title? When you have a component like the Model A1 Intergovernmental Agreement, when you have the Customs Information Sharing Agreement with the United States, are these not components that work exactly in line with what you're saying?
One would hope so. One would hope so. But the operability of these components is what needs to be examined. You would have realized that some of our pre-interview discussions have always highlighted, for instance, not only the establishment of these components, but how they are managed, how they are in fact operated, and how do we gather the information being derived out of these components and utilize that as a product to initiate decision-making in government. So therefore, the Minister of National Security now has to ensure that the right team of experts are activated to bring to the fore what I'll call the executive strategies that are necessary to drive to the operational rollout. And it has to have a strong spinal cord of accountability. Because if the government is going to pump X amount of billion of dollars into national security, and we understand that it's a wide berth, we understand it's also going to be for the acquisition of assets, the payment of salaries, the continued payment of contractors and all of that, infrastructure development, and of course, the most important aspect, that social fabric that knits the tapestry of national security together. There is going to be a demand by the citizens, a demand by the National Security Council for deliverables. And therefore, accountability now has to dominate, has to be the predominant factor on the operational intent of the minister's, what I'll call the minister's directorate and his team.
Right. There are two sides to two areas coming out of what you're saying there. One is, as you would concede, there are a lot of things that are in the works, and it is not something that you can judge after just 1 year. You also would concede, because of your former posting, that there are a lot of things that a government can plan that may not be, that cannot be divulged in the public domain. So a lot of things may be worked on, and that's the reason I cited, I made mention of the Model A1 Intergovernmental Agreement along with the Custom Information Sharing Agreement. That's one end of it. Another area that I know the last time you were here you discussed was looking for the inspectorate for the police. And I wonder if, one, because of budget constraints, that may not be continuing, but I wonder if the PCA, for instance, cannot fulfill that role. We still in national security, but I'm in the area here of the police inspectorate, and now we have the PCA, which I believe can do the job unless you have a problem or a disagreement with the ability of the PCA to do the policing of the police.
I'm not saying that they can't do it. What I'm saying is that those are, first instance, the two separate ministries, one operates in the concept of sort of like an independent authority, and therefore there has to be what I call a national discussion that can expand the remit of the PCA to perform the functionalities of the inspectorate. Now, is this doable? Yes, it is. But it also will involve some tweaking and some adjustments to the way we do business. And therefore, it brings us back to the same agreed point that there are systems in country that can be expanded and explored with the right R&D approach, the research and development approach, to utilize now the intent of these, what I'm called new emerging strategies of government.
And technology, yes.
And technology, well, definitely technology plays a major role. So, we have been talking about, look, assessing the budget and looking at the way forward. Now, if we were to assess based on what was declared, what has now been reintroduced, and the way forward, it is important for the citizenry to know that in 2016, and I quote specific, it was indicated that we will move swiftly, verbatim, to establish a joint border patrol agency to manage the security and integrity of our open and vulnerable borders. That was not done. The Trinidad and Tobago service will be modernized. We will establish a police management agency with a mandate to develop the necessary leadership expertise, and it goes on and on. The agency will set and maintain the ethics and values, etc. That was not done. The leadership of the police service will be secured. We will introduce early legislation to amend the present procedures for the appointment of a police commissioner. We are still seeing that as a work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress because it was introduced.
Exactly.
It was in fact introduced. It just did not. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Our citizens will develop trust and confidence in the police service. And there speaks about your point a while ago, the police service inspectorate. Not done. Regional corporations, as it would contribute to the local constabularies and to the introduction via the local government region. Not done. Is it in a rollout process? So there are a number of issues that weren't done. So one has to know that claims that have been more or less reductions in crime statistics or specific segments is you see it frequently being populated out there in the domain. And it is not the standalone benchmark to indicate that statistics are low, so crime is low. One has to understand crime is seasonal, and there are different types of crime peaks at certain times. So with those introductions of 2016 that we don't see happening yet for 2017, draws us to the point of, okay, we need to know what has been happening. We need to know whether these things are going to be continued or not. And therefore, we have to give credence to the Minister of National Security, because he has to do the deep dive now. When he speaks in Parliament, he will have to identify, he will have to then draw down on what is being allocated to the Ministry of National Security and speak to the public, speak to the citizenry as to how and where this money would then be channeled. So therefore, the details of the allocation is we are anticipating from the Minister of National Security the corridors within which this money will be placed and what are the expected results, what are the timeline for these results, and then provide for the citizenry an opportunity to hold these agencies accountable for the achievement or lack of achievements of the objectives that are hopefully going to be clearly defined by the minister when he speaks.
Yes, the allocated this year is 8.5 million. That should be $8.5 billion, and that is substantially down from what was it before? Last year's estimate was what? So it's substantially down this year, however, but the development of computer systems for the police service, technologically upgrading the information gathering apparatus, all these things is what I expected that large infusion from last year's allocation to have well on the way. Are you saying, however, and I'm asking you this in just a need to know, that some of these things can be happening, but do you have to account for all the under the engine work that you're doing, particularly when it comes to national security and how the money is in fact used? Because many folks say so much money was put in, but they want you to call every nut and bolt of what was done. Is that the sort of thing you can do? Is best that there be like joint select committees that will sit down and discuss this and see where this is done, because these are not things you can put out there.
Oh, you're very correct. And that is where the minister has to embark on a very robust information management systems approach. And therefore, how he communicates to the National Security Council, how he communicates to Cabinet, how he communicates to Parliament, and how he communicates to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who are all living in a global village has to be articulated with the proper legislative guidance and also what is known in the industry as the understanding of the security classifications, what can be said and what cannot be said, and to whom it can be said.
Moving a little bit away from the budget, just for a quick moment, you with your expertise is well poised to answer this. What is your take on the meeting of national security ministers from the Caribbean, Latin America that was recently held here? What is your take from that? Is that not part of what you had? Again, the last time you were here, we were very thankful for that. But it's part of what you advanced, that we have to accept we cannot do this alone and we must do this collaboratively. And was that a move in the right direction? I mean, we were fortunate to host it here. We were not the first ones hosting it. It's been hosted before, but it's the first time we had it. But it took place. Is that also a move in the right direction?
What exactly? The meeting with the president and the...
No, this is the one with the national security ministers.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, no problem. I, in fact, think that it is a very good move because apart from the promotion of collaboration, it's the underpinning of networking, which translate into standardization. And therefore, when the ministers of national security of the region and invited guests meet in that room, they begin discussing policies and strategies. They begin discussing some of the threats that they are facing. They begin, most importantly, brainstorming on the lessons learned capacity. Those key dynamics contribute towards better governmental approaches. They contribute towards working smarter and standardizing in one language of understanding. We cannot, as a region of CARICOM, operate in silos or separate, because the threat that we are facing, the sisters and brothers of the Caribbean are also facing. We saw that specific in our eyes based on your last interview there with our people in Jamaica. A threat of a hurricane passed through the region, and we were all, quote unquote, targets of this storm. That is from a national disaster perspective. If we were to replace the national disaster with crime and all of the key issues of crime that were mentioned by the Minister of Finance, transnational organized crime, terrorism, fraud, you name it, they're all facing it. What does Jamaica do to prevent itself and prepare in the face of a natural disaster? What is Trinidad and Tobago doing? What is St. Lucia doing? Switching lanes, what will Jamaica be doing with regards to preparing and preventing the threat of transnational organized crime, terrorism, and fraud. Those discussions are necessary. It should not only be a conference, workshop, talk shop. It should be a continuity of dialogue and exchange. And therefore, amongst the CARICOM, as I have said before, and I'm saying it again, should be established a secured medium of information sharing and communication that will allow ministers of national security, decision makers, and key agencies of national security to share information so that we can begin moving in a more collaborative and cohesive way to treat with the threat of crime and criminality within the region.
It is 8 minutes away from the top of the hour, 11 o'clock. The voice you're hearing is that of Commander Garvin Heerah, who is a senior lecturer at Anglia, Ruskin University, Cambridge Business School, and module leader of organizational transformational and organizational behavior. Before that, he held a position in the National Security, National Operations Center. And I keep saying that because I want us to understand the context from which we are having this discussion. There are two things with the one that I fully agree with, and it was rather enlightening to me when you said it, but I'll hold that for the second part. When we speak of crime, a lot of folks, unfortunately, just link that to the street crime we see here. But white-collar crime is a serious matter, and it is sometimes the bedrock of a lot of crimes happening as a result of white-collar crime, which is not as heavily prosecuted as it should be. You must be, I ask you, are you disappointed that the FATCA legislation was not, in fact, signed, even though the time has been extended? Because I feel the reciprocal part of FATCA is going to contribute greatly towards that question of national security that you speak about all the time. And absent that, you're looking for a bedrock from which a lot of things can spring or continue to go awry. Were you disappointed at the shenanigans that went on with that?
Not so much disappointed, but a bit concerned. I'm not disappointed because I know it's going to be signed. And clearly, the opposition has directed that they need to see certain things in place. As we would say in the over-the-counter discussions, they need to see T's crossed and I's dotted. The government has indicated that they have explored and in detail, meticulously, gone through sentence by sentence, bullet by bullet, to ensure that it meets the requirements of the opposition. Yet still in some sort of dialogue, we see backs being turned against each other, walking away, that type of stuff. That has me concerned because as a country, we have to know, and citizens need to understand, because a lot of people are very myopic in how they're looking at the FATCA policy. They are seeing it as, gosh, we're going to have to start getting taxed on our credit cards. We can't do online purchases. Some of the very low-level issues. What, in fact, signing the FATCA is doing relates right back to the title of our budget, which speaks about growth and development, transformation, and the blueprint for that, and importantly, a brighter future. Mm-hmm. Do you want a brighter future for Trinidad and Tobago? Do you want to see Trinidad and Tobago transform and grow and develop, regardless of whose government is in power? Then if you are, we need to find a neutral ground and identify a document that we can agree upon for moving forward. This is taking us around in circles. And therefore, it would need constructive dialogue. This is not a time for conflict. This is a time for what I call the coming together, the breaking of walls and the building of bridges, so that we can move forward with the clearly identified deliverables of FATCA and ensure that Trinidad reaps the benefit. We have to ensure that when this is plugged and the pegs go down, that Trinidad and Tobago also has a benefit for continuity based on the U.S.'s directives.
And I'm very happy that you framed it that way, because at the end of the day, it does not matter who is in power. White-collar crime will continue for a long time, and whoever is there, whoever is wherever, we must go after that. And that reciprocal arrangement that would exist under a FATCA arrangement is going to be helpful to the country in general.
Correct.
There's an area the last time you were here, and on reflection, I kept smiling about it. The area where you have great reluctance, even disdain, for reports of crime numbers. It's being shown and reported almost weekly in the public domain, and a lot of folks say the same thing you were saying, but they cannot articulate it as well as you have. They say, for instance, you can give me all these numbers, but listen, I am still feeling as nervous, as scared, and as insecure as before. Explain detail. What is your reluctance in these press conferences that take place every week? You call them snapshots and not a real indicator of what's going on with crime.
You see, we have to understand that ComStat, computer statistics, plays a very important role in the planning and more so the administration that comes into place for crime prevention and policing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has a cadre of experts who understand the dynamics of crime.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this morning with my wife, we were looking at a movie prior to coming down here. And in the movie, one of the investigators is asking, have we explored the victimology that surrounded the crime? And then she's looking at me, does Trinidad and Tobago continue along these lines, Garvin? Are we doing this? You know, and it's not that we're looking at movies. It is understanding that there are clear issues that needs to be identified. It's not just about presenting statistics, saying, well, we have X amount of murders, X amount of rapes, car thefts, whatever, and hoping that this can assure the citizen that you're now safe. ComStat, computer statistics, identifies trends, tradecraft, occurrences, and these statistics must now be used to implement, institute, and execute actions that can work towards deterrence of crime, that can work towards responses to crime, that can work towards detection of crime. The CCTV system that was introduced with the national grid was not only to look at areas or hotspots. It was expanded to create the safe city concept known in the domains of homeland security, to be able to identify trends, identify faces, identify gatherings, place what is known as strategic response vehicles in place, air response also, and utilize this information to, when gathered and analyzed as an intelligence product, to treat with crime prevention and deterrence. So therefore, my advice is to empower our police service and law enforcement agencies. It's not just about presenting statistics. It is to indicate to the citizenry, how are you using these statistics to detect, deter, prevent, and respond to crime? And as I said, there's a living example bubbling to be expanded and to be utilized out of the former National Operations Center, the CCTV grid. That needs to be expanded into the remits of its capabilities and utilized. So yes, we can still present robberies taking place, arms that were seized, narcotic seizures, rapes, and whatever. Okay, that shows that we've responded and we've actually arrested people. But to the sensible, we're in the information revolution, Mr. Bishop, and we discuss that. We're in the information revolution. You can get information by the press of send. People want to see a progress that has developed from crime scene to court. And that are some of the statistics that needs to be promulgated in the public domain.
We are talking about national security generally, and then we link it with what was allocated, the $7.7 billion allocated to it this year. Considering what you yourself admitted, the first budget, again, this was part of our first conversation, had a lot of inherited issues to deal with, which is to pay for, etc. What is allocated this year is consistent if a lot of these projects that were outstanding have in fact been approached. A number of the things, i.e. police stations and so on, are things that we don't know the status of. Unless you know differently, please let me know. But if we don't know anything on that, what I know was mentioned in the budget is the question of Remand Yard, the prison up there, and there's an effort made to do more modernization and upgrade. Are you encouraged by this?
Well, before I answer your question, I want to send a challenge out there. I believe that the media houses, be it a specific media or a joint media team, needs to be given the privilege of visiting remand and visiting the infrastructure and visiting what is known as Them Boys Jail to start with. And then there's Golden Grove and there's Heerah. Whether the information that is received and the exposures there can then be promoted to the public is something we can still discuss. But it's for the reality and the understanding of what is taking place in these archaic infrastructures. So therefore, it is not just identifying $1 million or $2 million for the upgrade of the remand yard or the introduction of CCTV cameras or a refurbishment of the youth training center, or we'll talk about Heerah after. It is about conducting a national review of our present prison system, indicative, back to the title of our budget, as the blueprint for transformation and growth. Because we, over the years, have not seen any transformation and growth in the prison system. We see money being allocated to various aspects of the prisons, but not a holistic development. Are the prison authorities involved in a discussion with national security, being led or overarchingly led by the minister with an expert or experts or team, subject matter experts, specifically focus towards the development of our prison system in a modified, modernized intent with clearly identified goals and objectives over a specific timeline? That is what we need to address. So it's acceptable. I'm sure the Commissioner of Prison says, okay, so we are getting some money, so we can look at some development here, acquisition of assets there, but we continue to do those things when in fact our prison systems needs immediate transformation and growth and development to a modernized facility.
We got right up to the top of the hour. Just before we close this down, I do want to ask you about something that I know it bothers the nation in general. And this is the question of the police commissioner. We know that the down the ranks, it is going to have an effect if you don't have a person who is a permanent commissioner of police. The proposals to have a police commissioner appointed has been objected to by the opposition. What is your take on what we should be looking for in a police commissioner, and who would you recommend if you care to take such a hazardous journey?
I'd have preferred you ask me something about algebra. The commissioner of police and the appointment, as we know, is plugged by numerous supported aspects. And I say supported aspects dealing with legislation, dealing with utterances out of the Attorney General's office, the Minister of National Security, National Security Council. Also, there is, I believe, somewhere existing a list of nominees or interested parties who might be willing to throw their hat in the ring. But it brings us back to the point of understanding country. And it's the same approach, I think, that needs to be articulated with the factor policy, in that it is not about politics. We cannot be playing politics with professionalism. I'm a victim of that today. You know, in the storms of the People's Partnership pushed me against the rugged rocks of the PNM, and the storms of the PNM was pushing me into the swirling, treacherous waters of the partnership. I was able to weather that storm, and today still sail in the stormy seas, a broken rudder, a little patch here and there in the sail, but remain neutral of those political interventions. And therefore, we have to understand that there are some appointments in country, there are some decisions of the National Security Council, there are some decisions that exist in the aspects of safety and security that needs to be apolitical, it needs to be neutral, it needs to be for country, and therefore the right person needs to be put in place after we have undergone and explored the entire 360-degree meticulous approach of the appointment. And I don't have any nominees, to tell you the truth. What I would like to see is that we treat this with some priority and some urgency. In 2016, in the budget, it was announced. In 2017, we are forced to accept that it's a work in progress. We, as the citizens, would like to see some sort of urgent attention being paid to the establishment of a permanent commissioner of police that can now bring to the fore, especially with his leadership, transformation, as entitled by our budget, but also the introduction of strategies, international best practices, and also the involvement of a whole of government approach towards reduction of crime and the what I'll call the re-emergence of safety and security for our beloved nation.
It's a great conversation, always a good one to have you here. I'm going to ask you a question. You're either going to blush or tell me that I'm crazy. Are you throwing your hat in the arena for Commissioner of Police at all?
Well, as you can see, I walked into the studio without a hat.
That is a good dance if I ever. Garvin, Heerah, I thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you to the team. It's always been a pleasure.
Always thank you for coming in. You have yourself a wonderful day, sir. It is 11 o'clock. He said, I walked in without a hat, as you can see. All right. It's 11 o'clock in the city. That was Commander Garvin Heerah.